Well, you know, we had a tie in the NFL, didn't we? 37-37. Even overtime didn't settle it. We're not going to settle anything in this overtime either, but we're going to continue to talk about the best running backs ever, and we're going to start laying the groundwork for talking about some great quarterbacks of the past. Those people who remember Victor Salcedo and Roy Gonzalez. You get your time in a couple of weeks. I wanted to start with this overtime section. You give me a name of a guy and I'll tell you a neat tidbit about him. I may have to make it up.
Okay, Frank Smith from Ed Couch.
Everybody knows he sells cars, right? He sold more cars than anybody in the world. But the fact is, he was a great back for Ed Couch in the 50s. He played ball at Rice. He was a starter.
That's the same guy, is it?
It is.
Is it really?
You're darn right it is. Frank Smith was an amazing football player. He was a back.
Wow, I had no clue it was the same person. I saw Frank Smith on there.
I knew I wanted to lead with that because I knew a lot of people didn't know.
Now, here's a name that everybody would probably remember, especially if you're a Cowboy fan, which I'm not.
Yeah.
Tom Landry.
You mean Tommy Landry, as he was known in high school? No, he was a great single wing back in the day. He was a great punter. In fact, you know, the guy could do everything. But you can't mention a list of great backs in the Valley without at least throwing Tommy Landry's name in there.
Wow.
He was amazing.
Mike Spratt.
Mike Spratt was a guy, Sherryland fans, you have to be kind of older to remember this guy. In the late 50s, Jake, Sherryland had some great teams. They won back-to-back regional titles, which means you played 2 games and you went home. But they won their 2 games. Mike Spratt scored 406 points in his career for Sherryland. I think he's the guy that went up to U of H and played for the Cougars. We've had a bunch of guys do that.
Wow.
Carlos Lopez from San Ysidro was another guy that played at U of H. So Mike Spratt, he had a brother too. There were 2 Spratt brothers that I can recall.
All right, one was a Junction boy from Rio Hondo, but Mike Spratt, right?
The brothers Kotchtick.
Kotchtick.
Right, one of them ended up coaching at Ed Couch in the 60s. Don Kotchtick was the guy that went up to A&M. Those guys were all tremendous players, all played college football. One of them was actually a champion tennis player, a state champion tennis too. The Kotchtick family in Rio Hondo right now, they're raising the roof because they remember those cats, man. They were great.
All right, and I remember this guy. Followed Meshack from Westaco. Blackman.
Yeah, Michael Blackman. I used to call him Robert Blackman because it's the name of a Seattle Seahawks defensive back about 10 years ago. Remember that guy?
Yep.
But look, man, he followed a tough act in Meshack. He was his buddy. He was a junior. Meshack was a senior. You can read about that in my book. I'm shilling, obviously. But Blackman came on. He averaged like 12 yards a carry. He had about 1,700 yards. He was a great running back for the Panthers. I wish he'd have had more time, another year.
Now, this is something that's brought up all the time to me. Westaco East has always had a
plethora. And I'm glad you brought that up because we're talking about all these great backs, and people are like, what about Andrew Alvarado? What about this guy, Munhia? Well, in my story, when I wrote about Lupe Marone, I hope I was weeping profusely over the keyboard because it was so great. Alvarado was great. Munhia was great. Bobby Gonzalez was amazing. He's had one of the greatest one single season, 2,700 yards, some such. I put Lupe Marone in the same group. He has an attribute or 2 from each of those kids, man, because he's very quick, he's very strong, and he's just a good, level-headed kid. He just runs the ball like crazy. He can throw, he can run punch back. I love the kid. I think he's one of the best players we've had here in years.
Now, you asked him a question last week, and you know.
What is the meaning of life?
You asked him a very easy, but not easy to answer honestly. You know, you asked him, you know, where did he see himself in comparison with Trevor Spades? And he had been to some combines with them in the summer.
Yeah, so they know each other.
And they got along. They get along really well. He actually, you know, feels that, you know, they're very good friends. Well, you know, and that's something to be said. I mean, you know, because, you know,
they're not going to be woofing at each other like the coaches.
They appreciate each other.
Right.
They appreciate each other's talents.
And you know, Jake, it's funny because we can say, well, this guy and that historically. Sometimes the kids know and care a little bit less about that than we do. The old folks sit in the bar stool, I'm more harder this, you know. Hey, the kids just love to play football. Now, with the media today and with the reach of all the internet and stuff, they're a lot smarter than they used to be, man. But because when I was in high school, I couldn't tell you who used to play for Austin Lanier. Who cares? You know what I mean? Now, we make it a big deal here, and you know, I hope the kids appreciate that. We're not trying to hype them up too much, but it's kind of fun for us to see who they remind us of and who you know who they're gaining on yardage-wise. You know, I wish Lupe had another year. Maybe I could make him junior like I did Madden for a while. I just want Madden to play another year. All right, who else? Little school guys, man. People in Santa Rosa will tell you about Rene Vela all day long. Okay, he was a great back in '87. The people in La Villa will tell you about who? Tony Contreras. The third year La Villa had a team, he had 1,852 yards. I remember going out to a practice one day. It was all muddy and it was just horrible. I had this little handheld crappy camera. That was how much money we had back in the day. It was like a nothing, little brownie. And I took a picture of him doing like a Heisman pose. That guy was a good running back.
Wow.
And La Villa had a kid named Ricky Cantu. There have been several.
Yeah, Ricky.
But the original played 5 different sports, including including golf for La Villa back in the 90s. He was a great basketball player. He once scored more than 50 points in a game.
Wow.
So these small schools have had their share of backs. I'm going to tell you about the first, Juan Martinez. We were talking about the La Jolla guy, the horse. Well, this Leo Morales at Roma, that guy was that size. He was a great basketball player. He had 1,400 yards for the Gladiators, and that was back when they weren't competitive. He did that all by himself back in the early 90s. Leo Mireles. People out there remember who I'm talking about.
I'm just amazed that you brought Ricky Cantu because, you know, people tend to forget about him.
Yeah.
He was a great, I mean, he was a great 7 guy,
Yep.
and he was even better.
And remember, there were 2 Ricky Cantus.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I always tried to figure out whether they're related. Well, they probably are. Someone's going to email us, hey, dum-dum, they're brothers, or that's the son, or whatever. But that name is special out there with the Cardinals. Now, let's go to the...
Our categories.
Right, because we had the original categories we talked about, right? Read them off if you don't mind. Our assistant at home, yeah.
The original categories were speed, power, balance and agility, quickness, instincts, and playing in the clutch.
Right. And so my question here is, how do agility, quickness, and instincts differ? Right? I mean... quickness is not instincts, but and agility is more quickness, right?
Yeah, but agility is something like we've seen like this year with Trevor. Trevor is able to
twist,
slice
turn,
through, you
right.
know, look, there's 2 guys and there's about a hole this size of maybe half my foot.
Yeah.
So, like,
and he gets through. So you can be quick, but you're not necessarily agile?
Yeah.
That's how you would say
You know,
it? That makes sense.
And, you know, there's a lot of guys that are very quick. They can bounce it outside really quick.
Is quickness instinct? And these are tough questions. I don't really know the answer. I hadn't thought of it.
I don't know. You know, you look at this year, Matt Whiteside is bouncing a lot to the outside.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's instinct. I think it's more...
Preservation?
Well, yeah. Well, I just think that this year he's more, I'm going to run to the outside.
Okay.
But there are certain guys like Mishak Rivas. You get the ball in his hands, and he knew exactly where he was going to cut, and if that was taken away, he had another hole he was going to...
He had a great plan B. Nobody had a better plan B, and nobody was able to juke and jive like him. All right, well, so back to the numbers means that, hey, one of the categories we forgot was just sheer numbers, right? And that's where Mishak with 3,347 touchdowns, you know, you don't touch that for a season, no. But Bradley 7,800, you don't touch that for a career. So, I mean, that's part of it too. This is round 1. Let me tell you something, guys. Mishak came out very well on that head-to-head, those 5 backs in those 6 categories. Mo Hunter, of course, whom I just wish you had video to be able to see Maurice, man, because there's a couple of guys that say they haven't. Look, man, we'll pay all kinds of money to borrow that video because you are not going to believe what a package he was, man. Speed, strength, quickness, agility, everything. So everything the kid can do, everything that Mishak did, Maurice Hunter did the same thing. So did Ellis, for that matter, and so did the other guy, Bradley Stevens. So that's why they're the top 5, I guess. Now, let's add some new categories. This is fun.
Okay.
Degree of difficulty. I call it the Gale Sayers category. Remember the year he was the Bears were 1-13. He rushed for 1,000, led the league. How in the world do you do that in a 1-13 team? So which of these guys had that situation? Well, Tony Ellis at Hannah didn't play on great teams. Mo did. Mishak did. The kids played on good teams. You know, the fact is, sometimes if you have great kids around you, it makes your performance better. That's why the things that Tony Ellis was able to do, 2,500 yards, 30-something touchdowns as a senior, they didn't have that great a team.
Yeah.
And so he was the Gale Sayers of that year, carrying his team on his back. What else we got over there?
Well, you know, if you think of that, Shaquille Evans, he had a very average to low average team.
And he came on that second half, and he was getting 290, 260. He was killing them, killing them.
And then, you know, he took it into the playoffs. You know, beating Mac High in first round.
Incredible.
You know, and he had one monster run at the beginning to give him all those stats, but you know, that was something special.
In Brownsville, sometimes you have to have that unique individual that can carry a team. That's why I like vets, because they got 3 backs, and they got good linebackers. They got a lot of players, man. I can't wait to see how they do this weekend. I may be trying to go down. Let's go down there Saturday night.
All right.
Yeah, man, have some Mexican food and go see the game at Sam's. I like that. Now, scheme and opportunity. Sometimes you get a guy who could have been a great running back, a 2,000-yard back, but they don't run the ball enough, right?
Jane Taylor is pretty much that mold this year. If
Yeah.
we're looking at one, he's in a spread offense, and he's not in the most conducive offense for him,
Right.
for what he does.
So he may end up contributing a lot, and I think that he will because he's pretty good.
Yeah.
But he'd be better off pounding the blast and the holes, you know, up front.
Yeah.
Especially since now, I mean, he looks big like he's been lifting, so he's
Yeah.
a big back now.
Yeah, I mean, boy, could you imagine a little combo between him and like Lupe Morona at the same team? Can you imagine those?
Incredible, man.
Yeah.
Lupe and Marone, I'll tell you, I still haven't gotten over that.
Tiki Barber.
Nah, Tiki Barber. All right, blocking, catching, versatility. I told you a while back we weren't going to talk about that, but let me just remind people that Bradley Stevens was a pretty good kicker and punter.
Yeah, and you know they would put him out there. They'd line him up, look like a wildcat, and then he'd punt.
Yeah.
here's the thing about Bradley. Bradley also played corner or safety, whatever needed.
He would have been a great defensive player,
yeah.
outside linebacker. Even he's strong as hell. He's a big, strong lower body.
Yeah, and Trevor's done it. I mean, there's quarterbacks like Santos that's doing it. Lupe Moron does it. He plays in a bunch of different spots. They'd love to probably play him in all these spots, but I mean, you need him.
Well, I'll tell you, you got to keep him healthy. You know. Speaking of Marone, man, I'll tell you what, that guy is just such a humble kid, coming from La Villa. Speaking of La Villa, right, we'll throw him in with Tony Contreras and Ricky Can too, man. I'm proud of him, man. Of course, I'm proud of all the kids for doing well, but to me, it just sometimes it seems like that's a unique story. That's cool, man. I hope he gets he may not get to 2,000. He would be the fourth Weslaco East back to get 2,000. They're going to have to play a few playoff games, I think.
Yeah. But coachability and character is something we all look at. I mean, look, there are some kids that are just pure turds. I mean, there's no.
You just try to keep them eligible and keep them out of trouble.
Yeah, and sometimes football is the only thing keeping them in school. Yeah. And look, granted, that's the greatest thing about extracurriculars.
I think so.
It gives them a purpose.
Yeah.
And hopefully they realize that you're getting an education at the same time.
Many a wayward soul has been turned to the good by sports. Let's just put it that way. So hopefully that will continue to happen. What you'd like to be able to do is raise up a generation of kids who don't need that extra boost. But you know what? Let's be realistic. Sometimes it is the case. I think our list of guys is pretty good. I will have to say this though. Of all the guys in our list, I think Bradley was probably the most sterling character. And that's not to insult the other kids at all. It's really not a comparison. It's just to say that I always found him to be very coachable. He wouldn't say a word, man.
And there are certain kids that are very yes sir, no sir to us. But then you hear you hear the real.
Some people are talkers, man. I'm like, golly.
And you know what? Look, I'd be the first to say, I was not very coachable.
This guy, I can tell, man. You're over there trying to incite coaching riots. What's up, man?
But you know what? There's a lot of kids that are very respectful. I think
the majority of them, yeah. Tony Ellis was a nice guy. I really liked him. Pretty quiet kid, He went up and played for UT. He wasn't that bad. All right, now, so we said that Misak has done well in the first round. The kid's done pretty well too, man. Spates is right in there. Let me tell you what I noticed this last couple of weeks. I know that it was against Lincoln, okay? And Lincoln's probably not the best defense in the Valley, and probably not in the district. But he was breaking tackles, man. He was running. The only thing I think that Spates needs to work on, and I think that's where he will continue to improve, is overall lower body thickness, okay? Because he's not skinny leg. He ain't chicken leg Sanchez, but I mean, he can get bigger. I think he's going to get thicker. His upper body is amazing. He looks like a fighter, a weightlifter, He continues to do squats and lift on his legs, whatever they decide to do, the coaches and his parents and that. I feel like he has a chance to be at the head of this conversation. He's pretty dang close now. I mean, I didn't want to close this with a solution because it's an open-ended conversation, but for a guy halfway through his junior year to be included in a discussion of these greats of all time speaks well for the kid, speaks well for Littleton, and we can only hope to imagine what the kid will come up with next. He and his team, by the way, because he's always the first one, speaking of coachability and character, he's always the first one to say, hey, we got other backs. Hey, we got a great line. They got, 2 Esparzas and a Pequeño and a couple other guys. Those guys are knocking the dog out of people. What did Littleton say in the paper? You come to Memorial, you're going to have to live.
Yeah.
And that means even the kicker's a big kid.
Yeah. And here's the thing, too. Has there been a coach in the last 10 years that has had, better running backs than him? I mean, look, Weslaco East has had really good running backs.
Man.
But
Port Isabel's had its share. Good backs.
But Littleton has had, he had Bradley, the Grancellis.
Grancelli, that guy was tough. A very underrated back. You might even put Grancelli. If there was a top 100, he'd definitely go in there.
Yeah.
There's a second tier of guys. See, I put Lupe Marone with Fred Garza, with Logan, with Travis Sanders. There's about 15 guys with Tommy Cox from the old days and others. We've talked about them all. I can't think of too many backs we haven't talked about. I think we've done a pretty good job. Even Luke Ramsey of Harlingen South, he had 1,700. May have mentioned that already. That's a repeat. You can bleep that out. But that second tier of 10 or 15 or 20 backs, man, I put Marone in that. That's my closing statement. Is I was so impressed with that kid that I put him in that second tier of great running backs, and he should be pleased to hear that.
Yeah, and depending on how he plays, who knows?
Hey, man, he finished about 2,200.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, but East had some good backs, and they're probably going to have some more in the future. Well, Jake, next week on Overtime, what we're going to try to do is transition into talking about quarterbacks. Yeah, because we've had a few. Do you know that Corey Detmer's son is now playing for Somerset? And he's a pretty dang good player, playing for Sonny Detmer. You guys Mission fans will remember.
There. He's got his cousin and and his son there.
What's the cousin's name?
I can't remember.
Ebenezer
Yeah.
Detmer. We're going to find out his name. We're going to find out a lot of stuff. We're going to come back and talk some quarterbacks. What makes a great quarterback? I don't know, but we're going to try to find out. Overtime is done, and it's not a tie, although it kind of is because we didn't pick a back. So there.